The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello and welcome to the Srijan Wednesday webinars. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, this is an initiative by Srijan where we have industry experts explore the emerging technology trends and analyze how enterprises are driving their digital transformation. In today's session, we are joined by Gaurav Mishra, Business Head, Srijan Technologies. Gaurav has been closely working with enterprises in their digital transformation journey. He is specifically involved in enhancing the customer experience and helping enterprises put together the right chatbot strategy. Today, Gaurav will explore the challenges in creating intelligent bots and how to make sure your enterprise content strategy is bot ready. Before we begin, I would request all participants to please type in any questions you have during the session, and we will take them up in the last 15 minutes of this webinar. Also, please don't forget to take the conversation live on Twitter using our hashtag SrijanWW. Now that that's over, let's get right to it. Gaurav, over to you.
Thanks, Niranjana. Hi, everyone. This is Gaurav Mishra. I've been here working with Srijan for a few years. So let's get started around, how to build your content strategy, for the AI first world. You've seen the mobile first coming in and becoming a big, push in the marketing world. Now, how do you go on and ride the wave of AI and essentially start focusing, building a content strategy that is future proof, that is AI first, right? Before we start, quick, glimpse of the social handles. I'm available at Twitter on gmishra. My LinkedIn ID, is, you can just go to gmishra.com. It will redirect you to my LinkedIn profile. Pretty active on LinkedIn. And then, obviously you can email me at gaurav.mishra@srijan.net. So let's get started, right? So why it all, we are spending, time right now and talking about this, right? So Gartner says that by 2020, 85% of the relationships that the customers will manage, right, in terms of communication, will be done without interacting a human, right? That means most of these conversation would happen via some kind of bot, voice or chat, doesn't matter, but it would not be via a human. That's a pretty big number. And slowly world is moving away from screens, right? This is a adoption curve for all the all the emerging technologies, all the emerging trends, right? And you can see that right now the virtual assistants or the bots or the conversational user interface is at the innovation trigger right now. If you can see that right there, conversational user interfaces, virtual personal assistants are that innovation trigger. And we're looking at I mean, we're going in a way where it's the expectations is peaking up with these technologies, and slowly it will move downwards to the curve, and we start then seeing it maturing. So the whole trajectory where technology starts getting matured for the larger consumption is already there, and the world is actually moving away from screen from a content point of view, right? And as you would know that it's getting very cheaper. Google Home Mini or Amazon Echo Dot both are at $50, $50, pretty cheap, and it's growing every year, right? But right now we are about 1.3 billion devices on over the world, and we're probably looking at somewhere around 1.8 billion by 2020. That's a huge number in terms of digital assistants. Now, having said that, right, having been talking about the bot and going through on saying that yes, the bots is the future. Bots is something that is gonna change the entire industry in the way that content gets consumed. But let's face it, right? Right now, bots are pretty frustrating. The experience that people have in terms of interacting with bots is not as good as it would be to interacting with humans. And a lot of time you'll see a lot of, or you'll hear a lot of naysayers talking about, that bot just doesn't work. Apart from that, there are other worries, like, government eavesdropping over from the bots, on to the via the Alexa devices, NSA recording the audios via Alexa has been a big term in last year or so. Another problem, another worry that people have is to whether bot will take away human jobs or jobs, menial jobs that a lot of people do. So yes, there are worries around there in the ecosystem as well, no doubt about it. But we are not gonna worry about that. We're not gonna talk about that right now. We are just gonna talk about how we will, how we can, as an ecosystem, build a content strategy, build the content, right now that we are building to make sure that it's future proof, right? So building content is expensive, right? And you would not want to get into a place where you are building content right now which is just not usable when the voice search start becoming mainstream completely, right? So already about 20% of the searches that Google has actually is coming from voice, from different phones. Now that's gonna get increased, and when that happens, you would want to make sure that your content is ready at that point, and you're not losing the voice search optimization or the voice search to essentially show you content. Now, how do we do that? Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about the meat. So, you already know about the web-based content, right? The way that web-based content is, very high verbose, right? You can essentially, have a page, 2,000 words, and you can still pretty much skim through that entire document, easily, and read it in about 3-4 minutes, right? You can essentially skim to the part which you essentially like, you like it, and you can just leave the part which you don't really want to read. And if you are a speed reader, you can pretty much read that entire 2,000 word article in 3 to 4 minutes. It's very visual, screen based, very rich in terms of hyperlinked content, right? That's been the fundamental way content and the information architecture has been working out all these years, where each content is having multiple number of links where you can essentially create relationship between one content and another, right? So if you are reading a content, reading a post, it will tell you that where do you go from here to essentially know more about the content, right? And it's a pretty complex information architecture today. On the other hand, the conversational content, where the content is essentially being served in a conversational interface manner, is very low verbose, right? You cannot expect Alexa to start reading a 2,000 words answer. If that happens, the listener will just lose all the patience that he would have, right? So you cannot have the same 2,000 words article which is being which are being read by the users on the website, served in the similar way on a voice based interface, right? Again, there is zero universal user interface, right? But when on the one hand your web based content is very visual in nature, in conversational content, zero user interface. That means all your content would be verbal and oral, right? What you hear and what you talk, right? And there's always a unidirectional flow. There is no multidirectional, right? You cannot look at a content and you go from 10 different places from there, right? You always have a one way of directional flow of the content, right? Which is very restrictive in all sense, right? And always the context of the content precedes the value of the content, right? So it's not what the content talks about. It's about what that content means, what is the intention behind that content is. It takes precedence, which is not very common in the web world, right? In the web world, you are mostly around what that content means, right? But in the conversational world, your content is around what is exactly the intent around that particular content. So now while making the differentiation, right, why this content strategy is important, right? As I said earlier, building great content is expensive, right, and difficult. And while you clearly see that there's two different way of consuming content from a web and conversational point of view, you can't expect content writers to essentially write content for two different platforms. It is expensive in the first place, and it's very impractical, right? One term that we use all the time in the conversational world is the conversational legibility of content. Can a listener understand this content well, right? If you're serving this content over a conversational interface, can the listener understand this content and understand what is that intent behind the content completely? I'll give some examples later on onto that. Another very important thing on the content strategy is that content strategy is very search driven, right? It's not a push where essentially you are like a place where you are having a home page and you're serving different kind of content and user doesn't know what content to read, but it's very pull centric, right? Where the user coming in is asking a specific question from the voice interface or from the voice device, and you are serving that content from there. Again, as I said, it's very unidirectional flow, right? Versus a link specific link pages where you can essentially move from one specific content to another at any point of time, right? I hope that gives some idea on the content strategy, on why this whole topic is extremely important, right? And before we delve into some examples of these places where if we say that what is that conversational legibility means, or what does we what is the difference between content which is written for the web versus the conversational, let's understand that how bots essentially understand that which content that they need to serve, right? Which is a little important and usually not understood well, right? So here is an example on saying that somebody talking from Alexa, tell plan my trip, I need a vacation. Now this particular sentence is essentially called an utterance in the conversational world ecosystem, right? It's an utterance that a user is is saying. Now this utterance, there are multiple segments in this utterance, right? One is definitely the wake world, where you say Alexa, which essentially invoke Alexa to start listening and executing on your utterance. When you say tell plan my trip, it essentially invoke a particular app in which you need to essentially take some action. And then I need a vacation, I would like to take a trip next Friday, is essentially a complete utterance where we have a slot which is called next Friday. Now, I need a vacation, I would like to take a trip, essentially invoked a specific intent called plan my trip intent, right? So via different utterances or different words, you can essentially invoke multiple intents. So right now, when I'm saying that I would like to take a trip, the Alexa understand, or the bot understand that this particular user is trying to plan a specific trip, and let me invoke a specific intent which is called plan my trip, so that the user can start planning the trip via this particular utterance. It can be multiple things. It can be checking for a flight status. So it can say, Alexa, tell plan my trip to check my flight status. In that case, the intent would change to a flight status intent or not plan my trip. Another important aspect of this the entire utterances is slots. Think of slots as variables in the programming world, where you can have any dynamic value that can be built in and essentially used in multiple ways, right? For example, right now here, saying that I would like to take a trip next Friday. On next Friday is right, and it understands that the next Friday means of the date coming in next week, which is here 20th December 2017. Now that slot can essentially have default variables like dates, days and things like that, and it can have custom variables. right? For example, a particular car manufacturer might want to create a variable slot, a custom slot, where it want to, essentially have all the, kind of cars or the different model of the cars available in that custom slot, right? I hope, this gives a sense on how different bots, how the bots understand that what is the user that wants to do from this particular utterance, what is asking from. Let's take some couple of examples, right, which will give some understanding on that why the content, the web content and conversational content is so different, right? Now let's look at from, this is a real, real time or real life scenarios, where a site called Georgia Gov, they moved from, not moved, but they essentially, created a Alexa skill and kind of used the same, tried to use the same content that they had on the web on the Alexa skill as well. And in that particular exercise, they found a lot of places where the content that they written on the web was just not exactly fitting, for the conversational interfaces, right? And got some very good, real life examples on, what was that, right? So, for example, on their FAQs, which is a very usual way on which content is get pulled in voice devices, is, it says that how long can I receive benefits? Now, this particular question was essentially on a section called employment benefits, right? So the FAQ already assumed that a user would know that he's on a page called employment benefits. Now, this might be completely fine, if you are in a web world where you're not, you see the screen and you know which section you are in. When you are consuming the same content over Alexa or a voice assistant, you cannot just say that how long can I receive benefits. You have to give the context as well. So the way that they changed that FAQ was say that how long can I receive employment benefits, rather than just saying that how long can I receive benefits. Similarly, on benefits taxable, they change into are employment benefits taxable. Another very interesting place where FAQs and the rich link rich text comes in is call to actions, right, where you want a user to click on a particular link and go somewhere else to read something or do something, right? For example, in one of their FAQs, it said that you can receive payments through either a debit card or direct deposit. Learn more about payments. Now imagine if Alexa is reading the same kind of content and it says learn more about payments. For a user, it would just not make a sense, because you cannot, the user which is listening on an Alexa device would not understand that where does he go and learn, right? So that's where they changed that content to saying that rather than having a different link which says learn more about payments, they hyperlinked receive payments to essentially get, so it then now serves both kind of users. It's serving the web users because they can see the link and they can click on the link and go to a page where they can learn more about the payments. And it is serving the Alexa world as well, because Alexa is saying you can receive payments through either a debit card or direct deposit. It's not saying learn more like that, right? So the same kind of content is now useful for both web world and the conversational world as well. Now, one very interesting use case that they talked about was one of their FAQs actually said read more about this, okay, with no context at all, okay. Now this is very common, which people usually don't realize, that a lot of time FAQs assume that the user would know what he's talking about, right? And you can just click on there and go to a place and learn. And they have changed all such kind of FAQs and essentially put content in there. So right now that place where it said read more about this is saying in Georgia the family support registry typically pull payments directly from your paycheck and blah blah blah, right? And the link which said read more about this is right now linked with family support registry. So they can click on the user can click on the family support registry and essentially go to a place and look at a particular look the content in a much more verbose way. Right. So this gives a good idea on what a web world of content and what a conversational world content means, right? And just because when they were developing thing, and I wanted to talk about this as well. Conversational usability becomes very important because it's a completely new area, right? It's completely oral. There is no physical or a visual interface where you can test. There is no eye tracking mechanism. There is no thinking aloud mechanism test. So the only thing that they tried was retrospective probing, where they essentially gave an example case that you have a business license in Georgia, but not sure if you have to register it on an annual basis. Talk with Alexa and find out the information, right? No information given or no way on how to find out the information, what to ask and things like that, but just give them a test use case and and essentially in retrospective find out what the user is asking Alexa to understand that how they are trying to consume this particular content, right? A different way of usability or a testing point of view. While wanted to just quickly cover on content part and understand that how the content is being created and consumed at different places, and just wanted to move to the next part, which is that voice search optimization, right? And one of the reasons that all this is happening because clearly, as I said, 20% of the users, 20% of the Google search recently claimed to be happening on voice, which is a huge number, right? And more and more users are moving to voice-based search, right? There is some stats. Mobile voice study says that 55% of the teens and 41% of the adults in US actually use voice search more than once a day. That's a huge number, and it's going to increase as you go on, right? Again, voice gives what something that I missed was actually a way to accessible users, right? People who cannot who are visual impaired, who have accessibility issues, screen readers, just gives a very horrible user experience. So voice actually gives them a very good way of consuming the content, which is probably inaccessible in multiple ways, right? Huge segment which is benefiting by the voice, and voice is increasingly getting increased day by day. And how the visual search optimization is different than SEO, right? Which is optimization, search optimization, just on very action-oriented search. So it some would say find nearest destination, right? And that will tell the voice assistant that would have to find out a gas and give the result. Find best piece of places in Park, right? Now, if you're not content around saying that where you are there in New York, you're gonna lose that place for I mean, you might lose that for somebody else who having that optimized keywords there for the voice search and optimization. It's very real time. Most of the queries are happening with proximity to the computers. When some information very handy, they're on the road, they're going or they're eating, they would just call the Google Assistant and ask for that information, right? And DSO is very optimized for the local search, right? Usually a lot of queries actually come in near me queries. Find nearest gas station, find a pizza place near me, find an Indian restaurant near me, right? So voice search optimization is very lightly linked with local search or local search optimization that usually a lot of SEO people do in Google, right? And right, so they usually happen on asking for directions, to call somebody. You would take Google Assistant and ask them to call one of the favorite contacts or somebody would want them to read a specific text. You would whenever you were doing homework, you would want to know about a specific fact or a specific information, right? To play a song, find out about movie times, right? And then usual information like check the time, or where you are just just because you play at the time you can just say, and a lot of people use that, right? Check the time, tell me the weather, right? Things like that. And so with all this thing now, what do you do, right? What do you do essentially? Now, one major and long major things, a few major things that you just if you just keep keep in focus, it would be good enough for all the voice search part, is to optimize the long tail keywords, right? That's been one of the biggest in the search engine landscape, search engine optimization landscape in last few years, is around long tail keywords, and it becomes more prominent, right, as you move to the search. Because when you're talking with someone, your natural language, right, is a long tail keyword, right? You don't talk in specific keyword manner. You don't say pizza place. You say that what is the best pizza in a specific city, right? Or what is the best pizza place with thin crust, right? It's more long tail keywords, usually 3 to 5 words more, which around which the voice search happens, right? So when you're building content, optimize your content long tail keywords. Use question phrases, right? Optimize content for whom, where, how, right? How do I essentially go from Goa to Bangalore, right? What is the best place to eat fish in Goa, right? Where do I find right? So optimize content around who, where, how, the more question phrases, which will essentially give you much better results when somebody is doing that search from the voice point of view. Also LSI keywords, which are also known as semantic keywords, right? Which give a better content, right? So use more synonyms in the content to essentially give tell Google how to essentially understand what the content is all about, right? It's very useful, and I've seen people getting very good value in terms of SEO results if they use more and more LSI keywords. And one important part of voice optimization is schema, right? All the search engines have been talking about schema for multiple years, and still a lot of people in the SEO industry does not want to make the content ready from a schema point of view. I think this is the time, high time, and you have to look at the schemas and say that how do I give context to the search engines? How do I give context to my content and tell content that what this content is all about, right? So things like schema.org, Dublin Core, giving the microdata markup is very useful from voice optimization. Again, as I said earlier, local pages, local search, very related with the voice search, and so have more and more location data tagged with the content. And once you start looking at the metadata from a schema point of view, you'll start seeing that there are multiple ways where you can essentially tag different kinds of content. So if you're writing a content around New York, right, tag that content with the location data, which will tell Google that this particular data is around this particular place or the city, right? And will give them value over the other kind of content over the search results. Keep contact information handy, right? With the local listings in Google, right? So a lot of time, only good call to action that is coming out, at least in this voice world, is a call to a phone number, right? You would say that Google will tell you, or in the duplex coming in, Google is constantly going to ask you, do you want to call the person, or do you want to call the premises, do you want to call the business, right? So in that case, have the contact information handy, updated in your local listing to essentially become useful from a voice search point of view. Get mobile friendly, is a very no-brainer. You should do that in any way. And then last, which is actually a big point which I'll talk about next, is optimize your content for Google search featured snippet, right? I'm sure you would have seen this kind of featured snippets, coming, popping up when you're searching things, right? These are very important, and Google is constantly, reaching out to these particular featured snippets when it's responding to the voice search, right? So whenever somebody is, doing a voice search, Google is actually looking at these featured snippets and reciting all these featured snippets as the answers. Now that's if you are doing all the things right. I mean, there is a link here, which people can go and look at. Google has actually, created an entire book around how to create feature snippets in from a content point of view in your content. But if you get the featured snippets right, your content is actually ready for Google to essentially, present in a voice search format, right? So look at featured snippets right away. Right, and very similarities when when I was reading this, how do we create feature snippets, and how do we create a visual conversational content. It's a lot of similarity, right? So both needs to have long tail keyword phrases optimization. Both should look at a look for a specific questions, write a specific topic page, a specific page around a specific topic, use triggered words like how, what, and best, use headings h1, h2, h3, h4, use more conversational language, right? Very similar ways in which a visual or a conversational content would mean, right? So if you really want your content to be ready, focus on ensuring that Google is able to read them in a featured snippet way, in an easier way, right? Right, I just want to wrap it up, and open for questions. Few things that just want to quickly cover, right? Bots, beautiful thing with the bots, like AmazFlex, is that you can build one bot at one place and can extend that bot in multiple ways. Skype, Messenger, voice, phone, CRM, right? Multiple ways, chat, web-based, mobile-based, right? So that's a beautiful thing, right? That bots, once it start becoming mainstream, there would be no dearth on the how you're gonna consume that content. Multiple places where you can consume that content, and they've started speaking multiple languages, right? You can see a bot where it's speaking Arabic and Hindi along with English, right? So it's multilingual in nature. It's doing automatic translations, right? So it opens up multiple scenarios, which is just not happening right now in the web world, right? Where you are creating content in very less content is available in the vernacular languages, but with the bots, they are translating content in automatically in multiple languages, which is a great boost right now. And as you mature, as any bot matures, it becomes more transactional in the nature, and more personalized responses keeps on coming in, and which we are seeing slowly with few of the customers that we are at least serving at Srijan. Quick view on the bots architecture. I'll let you guys look into it more when you look at the slide. I'll not talk about that, but feel free to come back to me with the questions over Twitter or other, if you want to talk more on the how different bots is built on from an architecture point of view, right? Few specific bot engines or bot softwares out there, which are which are in the landscape. It's increasing day by day, but worthwhile looking at and trying to test it out few and find out which is the best one for your company and industry. Few success, Morgan, saved more than 360,000 workforce hours of workforce. Tata Capital, increased the lead generation by 600%. HDFC Bank, handled 2.4 million messages, right, with 160% growth on month. And other success stories as well. So bots are helping out big time, at least in the financial industry, a lot, right? And that's pretty much. I'm open for the questions. I go back to the specific topics if you want me to dwell a little more onto them. So yeah, open the questions.
All right. Thank you, Gaurav, for taking us through that session. And I would like to request all participants, if you have any questions, now is the time to type them in. And while you do that, I've already got a couple of questions in for Gaurav. So the first one we have is that in terms of digital transformation, enterprises are working on different fronts per se. So among those, how important or how critical is the chatbot, voice bot, and conversational interfaces part of it?
Sure. So, if I understand the question correctly, it, talks about that in the digital transformation, what is the place for a voice bot or a chat bot, right? So, enterprises are, I mean, when you're moving to the digital, right? And, multiple ways that, digital transformation happens. A lot of places where we are building, doing digital transformation, a lot of time, the content is being consumed in let's say dashboards, Tableau dashboards. In the places like these, you don't. It always not a web-based interface is not always a good idea, right? So there are use cases which are served on the bot or a chat-based interface very well than going on a web way, right? So when you're looking at places like customer support, KPI-driven places in the enterprises and doing digital transformation there, bots become a de facto or a very natural way of consuming that kind of content, right? Which becomes a very important part in the mobility strategy of these enterprises.
Okay. Next up is in terms of going or adopting or having a conversational interface strategy or preparing your content for that. Do you think it's only something that digitally mature enterprises should go after, or all sorts of enterprises, no matter where they are currently on their digital transformation journey, they should start to think forward about this?
So when the enterprises are looking at the chatbots, I'm very confident that they should not wait for the maturity to kick in from an enterprise point of view. It's the first mover advantage is always there for them, and if they start giving different services on the digital front to their customers in a chat format, in a bot format, I think they will ride the wave very quickly, and they will become one of the pioneers in the industry. So they should definitely not wait for the maturity to happen, but to use the digital transformation, their all their efforts, and use them in the bot world to essentially become pioneers in their industry.
Okay. Another question I've got in is that in most of your session you've talked about how enterprises could be restructuring their content to be consumed by these bots. Now, if there's like a different sort of a use case which does not deal with enterprise content per se, but let's say a book, which is, let's say, has a lot of content. So what would be the best way to sort of structure it for a voice-based consumption, like create different training phases, or just digitize the book as is, or we should look at a different kind of structuring for something of that sort?
Sure. So books are usually long-form content, right? And long-form content is not something that is made for the conversational world. Conversational world is always very focused on specific snippets of information or micro information or micro learning, what you call these days, right? So if you're looking at a book, you should the book writer or the person who's creating or writing the content on the book should have snippets inside the book in a more conversational manner, which are specifically tagged and said that okay, this particular part is essentially a Q&A or a conversation between let's say two people in the book itself, right? That kind of a content is essentially ripe for any voice-based search, But if you're looking at a long form content, absolutely not. Long form content cannot survive the conversational world, which has to optimize into more micro learning or a micro specific micro content which can be served to the consumers.
All right. So, sort of moving a little forward along this same line of thought, is that there have been reports of like a BBC or a few other media companies who have sort of used the conversational space to generate more interest in their long form content. Like they've done like a conversational game to promote a particular show. So, is that something that can also be is that something a strategy that can also be adopted by enterprises to sort of push their other long form content?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think what you're talking about is can the long form content be promoted using the these ways from a voice assistant or voice search point of view?
Yeah.
Absolutely yes, absolutely yes. Voice penetration, as it will increase, as it the more and more people will start consuming the content on the voice platforms, it will become a daily part in their life, right? And absolutely right, if you like today, you have to, if once you're looking at promoting in the social media space, when you're promoting on Instagram, promoting on Twitter, promoting on Facebook, right, you just go on creating snippets of content, right? Small snippets of content to essentially create teasers, create snippets of content to promote your brand or promote your specific show or things like that, right? Similar way that you would have to do it on the voice world as well. As that matures, you would have to create content which is more conversational in nature or more micro information in nature, and then can be used to promote content which is long term, or promote a specific show which is a more of a long term content.
Okay, understood. So, Gaurav, you've been involved in a lot of these digital transformation journeys with various enterprises across various industries. So, what are some of the common challenges that you have seen enterprises face in their adoption of creating a content strategy for bots?
So I think one of the major challenges that organizations face is, as I talked about in the very start, right, that bots are frustrating right now, right? It's not mature enough where you can look at a bot and say that, ask about a question and it would have the answer ready, right? There's still a chicken egg story of not having the enough utterances to be able to build a model where you would have the bot would be completely covering all the kind of questions that would be thrown on them, right? And what happened because of that once the executive team start testing out things, they become delusions with this thing, with the whole technology, and say that, okay, this is not working, this is not going to work, bots doesn't work. And which is a very natural way of reacting, right? If because adoption is still very new, while you're having more than 1 billion devices coming out in a year or two, you still the whole approach over the voice bots or the chat bots is that it's still a very nascent technology, which is absolutely fine. What all these enterprises should do is have a strategy in place, start building their content, their data in a way that it can be consumed by the bots easily. You do not necessarily need to implement it and start distribution of that content in that format, but make sure that whatever places you are building this content or building the data, make sure that it's ready for to be consumed by the bots, so that you don't have to go back in your in your content like the Georgia Gov did, and essentially change the content, make it fit for the conversational world.
All right. Another question that I've got here is that for India per se, if where we are catering to different language markets, and those are huge markets in themselves. What is the best sort of natural language programming platform for local languages in India?
So right now, from an Indian, and the best NLP engine right now that I have seen is the Google Dialogflow. Alexa is catching up, but nothing beats Dialogflow as an NLP engine. So if you're looking something for the Indian market and and with the NLP engine, which can essentially serve different languages in India like Hindi, Tamil, Urdu, and things like that, definitely look at Dialogflow as an.
Okay, all right. So, sort of going, carrying off from this answer itself, what are some of the technologies or tools like that enterprises should be looking at in order to achieve a sort of holistic voice bot chatbot strategy?
Sure. So I think so there are three main players in the market right now. You have Google Dialogflow, which I just talked about. So all the Google Home Minis or Google Home devices are essentially powered by Dialogflow. Your Google Assistant on the phone is also powered by Dialogflow. So that's one very prominent player in the market. Recently Dialogflow also launched duplex. If you have seen the video, the very famous video where the Google the Google duplex was essentially creating an appointment or booking an appointment for a particular user. That is something that they have already launched with Google Dialogflow. So Google Dialogflow is a very strong player. After that, you have Alexa engine called Lex, which is a very famous NLP engine. We have used them very extensively in multiple places. That's another NLP engine which is very widely used. Lex, so like you have duplex in Google Dialogflow. You have something called Amazon Connect, which is an entirely a complete call center or contact center solution which Lex or Amazon is providing. So you can essentially combine Lex and Amazon Connect to give a bot interface or a bot experience over a phone, right? So if a person calls in, let's say American Airlines, it can say that, okay, here is my PNR number, what is my status of my flight number, and things like that, pretty much, and talk to the bot and get that answer, right? So both Google and Lex, Amazon are doing that via Lex in Amazon, and Google Docs plus duplex in the Google ecosystem. Apart from that, Microsoft is catching up with Cortana and their Microsoft bot framework. They pretty much named it straightforward Microsoft bot framework. So they're catching up pretty well. They have launched the first multi-threaded conversational engine, right, which is not present at least till now in both Google and Alex, where you can have essentially like the bot can at the same time be talking and listening at the same time, right, which is right now problem, right? If when you're talking to the Alexa and you are giving a command, it can either listen or talk at the same time. Something that Microsoft has solved, and you have a multi-threaded option available. So yes, everybody is competing in this space, and it's gonna grow. You will have more local players coming in. Harman actually started rolling out speakers with having Cortana installed in that. So a lot of custom speakers would be coming in. I doubt there would be other players would be there. There are a couple of players in the market called Rasa, which is an open source NLP engine, and then there is something called Mycroft AI, which is a more voice-based NLP engine. So there are some open source options as well, which are out there in the market and is getting very famous. But yes, right now these three players, Microsoft, Google, and Amazon, three main in the market from a bot framework point of view.
All right. Thank you, Gaurav. So now there are like a couple more questions coming in really fast. right now, so I'm going to take them up. One is that natural language processing technology is in itself still, some would say, in its early stages. So, are we still very far off from a time when chatbots are truly human-like, or is that something we should even be thinking about right now? Making chatbots as close to the human experience as possible.
So it's not very far, and and the problem is not with the NLP engine, right? So there are few bots in the government space actually which are very good, and understand. I'm forgetting the name right now, but there are bots which are essentially very good from an answer point of view or from understanding what the user want to say. The challenge that right now the more the bots are facing is that they just don't have enough data to be able to learn and in a very broad way and say that, okay, what is the user going to ask me? Okay, so that range, that variety is not yet there with the bots, which is going to change very soon, right? So I think it's not that far. It's probably next 2 to 3 years, and you'll see bots becoming mainstream very easily. We are already on that curve. We are already reaching or peaking the expectations. So in easily 3 years, the bot would become mainstream.
Okay, all right. I think we've got another question about Indian languages, and the thing is, how good is IBM Watson to cater to Indian languages?
So I've heard good things about Watson. I haven't used it myself, so I can't really comment on that. But I definitely heard good things about Watson, and it's a promising technology used by multiple players in the market. So I'm sure they would be doing something with the Indian vernacular languages, but haven't used them myself, so can't really comment on that.
Okay, all right. So I think we talked about in the technology to be used in terms of chatbots, like how to get the chatbots ready. But when it comes to getting your content ready, are we still working just solely on the CMS and changing things on our CMS, or are there other technology considerations involved there as well?
So, sorry, can you repeat that question, please?
Yeah, so my question is, when it comes to getting your content ready for the bots, are we making changes to the content structure within the CMS itself, or are there other technology considerations also coming into play when we think about getting the content bot ready?
Sure. So I think right now most of the places where these changes are happening, these are existing CMSs. It doesn't make sense to start building new CMS. So both and WordPress are coming up with multiple ways of essentially creating and managing content for different bot interfaces, and it's just a matter of how do you configure these content management systems to serve the content in a more conversational manner. So yes, you just need to make sure that you have the current content management system configured in a way which is easy for easy for the bots to understand that what is the kind of content is being created.
Okay, all right. So I think moving a little forward from that particular question itself is that the CMS in enterprises, in a lot of enterprises, the CMS or changes to the CMS or changes to the content structure is something that is typically would be handled by development or a team that is well versed with the tech part of it, and understanding the content and how it should be changed or structured to make it more optimized for voice is sort of falls to a team which is well versed in content but not that well versed in tech. So do enterprises need to create some sort of a specialized skill set or team within their organization in order to get the job done?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and that's actually a very big gap right now in in most of the companies. So usually the communication teams are responsible for building such content or such communication for most of the companies. But there are very few people right now who can call. There are people coming up, and there is a new crop of people who are conversational designers or conversational user experience designers, but that they are very far and few, right? So yes, that's a big gap, and but still is something that should be filled not by a technical people but more by communication people who need to be trained on how a particular conversational interface or the conversational communication strategy should look like. That is something that again very few people are doing, but yeah, that would be catching up pretty fast.
Okay, all right. So I think with that we have sort of come to an end of all the questions that I have here. If our audience still have more questions, now would be the time to type those in. And in the meanwhile, Gaurav, would you like to? I mean, do you have a sort of a sort of checklist that enterprises can follow in terms of like very simple, obvious things, but those things that are easily missed in all of the bigger changes that are happening in order to make this uh, new content strategies successful?
Sure. I think one important part is to involve the testing, the usability testing of the conversational usability in your in any content strategy that you are creating, right? So always be very aware of how you are not losing or the context of the content in any way, that the content is not that the user knows that what this content is all about, as we talked about earlier, where the employment benefits. So you would a lot of time content team assumes that user would know that he is on the page of a employment benefit, right? So he would not, they didn't just bother to say employment benefit at all, right? So I think a very important thing that they should be taking care of at least is to ensure that they're giving context to the content all the time, by metadata, by creating content which is having very specific data, uh, you know not having lines like learn more about here or read more here and things like that, but essentially hyperlinking text in a way where it's inside the text, so that it can be consumed by both machine and the web user interfaces. So I think very few small changes, it doesn't make much difference when you're creating a content, but if it's a little discipline would ensure that your content is essentially ready to be consumed by the bots or by the voice search engines when they become mainstream.
Okay, all right, got it. So I think we have one last question, which is sort of a request for resources per se. So do you have any good suggestions on, where to find good information about structuring the UX of a conversational bot?
Okay, very good question. I don't have that very handy. I mean, it's kind of scattered across multiple places, across the World Wide Web. But definitely, just ping me on Twitter. This is my okay. Let me go there quickly. Okay, this is my Twitter handle. Just ping me there. And definitely would love to share some of the articles that I've read, or some of the places that I'm at least finding the information, and would love to share them across with any of the folks with interest.
Okay, that sounds great. Actually, what we could also do is that all our listeners would be receiving the session recordings in their mail by this time tomorrow. So what we could also do is that probably coordinate with Gaurav to gather a sort of resource list and share that across as well, along with the session recordings. I think that would be something really valuable for our listeners as well.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, great. So I think with that, we have sort of come to a close for today's session. I'd like to thank Gaurav for taking us through the great presentation and answering all the queries that we got. And I'd like to thank our listeners for joining us today, and you've been a great audience. So stay tuned for the session recordings as well as information on our next webinars. That's it for today. This is Nilanjana signing off.
All right. Thank you, guys.